Hello, class. This lesson is being prepared for Tuesday, March 24th. I hope you are all well, and I hope you are all getting into a routine as to best handle this virtual home instruction thing. And I just wanted to make sure that when you come into our classroom, you're able to find the material. Throughout the day, sometimes other students will throw stuff up there. I may throw stuff up there. And so as that happens, the lesson may fall further down on the stream. The easiest way to find what is actually really important for that day is to go into classwork. And under classwork, the first thing that's up here are things that were just posted that weren't necessarily put into a category. But then if you go down here, you'll see virtual home instruction. And within the virtual home instruction, you see I have everything listed by day. So today is day 7. So you'd open this up, and these are the things you're going to be working on today. The only thing you'll be turning in will be this assignment. So the first thing I have here is a completed assignment from yesterday, one from block 4, one from block 6, two little 60-second videos, and then after I'm done recording this, I will attach this lesson to this. I wanted to begin by going over yesterday's homework, or yesterday's classwork rather. And I decided I was going to share with you 2 assignments that were done by your classmates. So if you took a look here at the first question, it said in 1850, approximately how much of U.S. exports came from the sale of cotton? More than half the value of U.S. exports. That's a good answer. And then if you look at this one here, similarly, this person says cotton was accounting for more than half the value of U.S. exports in 1850. The reason why I'm trying to show you these is because some of you are really doing a nice job, like these 2 students who are putting a little effort into it, using complete sentences, and really showing some pride in their work. On the other hand, someone might put 50%. Now, that gets the job done, but remember, you're in 8th grade, you're going on to high school, many of you are going into honors or even AP, and you're going to have to get into the practice of really writing good answers. For example, in the late 18th century, what made processing cotton profitable and a lot less time consuming? Very good answer right here. In 1793, Eli Whitney created the cotton gin, which reduced the processing time and assisted in mass production of cotton. Very true. Now, there was a lot of confusion about this. The 18th century would be the 1700s. So remember, whenever you're talking about what century we're in, the century is always one number higher than the years we're currently in. So right now we're in 2020. So that means we are in the 21st century. Let's take a look at this answer. Eli Whitney created the cotton gin in 1793, and this made it so that cotton could be produced at a much faster rate. Again, very nice answer. Third question, what in New England and Great Britain made the demand for cotton possible? The textile mills in New England and Great Britain needed cotton to operate, and the American South supplied it to them. Good answer. The textile mills in New England and Great Britain were constantly demanding cotton. A very good way of putting it. And again, the reason why I'm going over these with you is because if you don't have answers that are somewhat like this, then again, I'm just trying to get you to reflect on the level of work you're doing and maybe step it up a notch. Next question. As textile mills demanded more cotton, the farmers of the South demanded what? The farmers demanded slaves. So as there was a demand for more cotton, the southern farmers began demanding more land and more slaves to go along with that land. And this person, they demanded more land and slaves to be able to make their cotton business as efficient as it could be. Very, very good answer. Now, these were just blanks. So the Cotton Kingdom down south, the deep states, Mississippi, they were known as the Cotton Kingdom. And the cotton was known as white gold. Next question was, why were New Orleans and Charleston important cities for cotton? They were important to cotton as they possessed the ports which would ship the cotton to international markets. Well done. And once again, New Orleans and Charleston were important because they were the ports that were shipping the cotton internationally. Great answers here. Now, this is where I got a whole array of answers. Remember, the purpose of this exercise was to get you to see why the South was so insistent on preserving this way of life. And so, although many of you had very deep thought answers that went into a lot of details about a lot of different things, the focus of this lesson was, I believe that slavery survived until 1865 because the government of America wanted to maintain unity despite the many sectional disputes. And by maintaining slavery, it was almost a mutual agreement to keep the sections calm and prevent them from going at each other. That's very true, and we're going to talk more about that today. But this is more specifically what I was going for. I believe that slavery lasted as long as it did because the people, specifically the Southerners, believed that slaves were necessary for them to make money through businesses like this cotton one. So again, that's what this was all about, is that if there were abolitionists going back as early as the 1820s, 1830s, why was it that this lasted for so long? And as this person said, there was the sectional divide. And again, the reason why there was the sectional divide is, quite frankly, because cotton was king at the time. Now, as far as Google Classroom is concerned, you see yesterday I posted the extra credit. And I said to you, this is only open to the first 5 students who get it that were not awarded points last class. Only one student out of all 116 kids got this right. And so in the presentation, I specifically said that the Missouri Compromise designated that any states above the 38th parallel would be free. States below would be slave. You should all have been like, wait a minute, that's not right. It's the 30th parallel. And only one person got that correct. Another reminder, go into Google Classroom. I'll go into period 7. Remember, there is a reminder of the assessment. That is due Friday. I could tell that many of you have not submitted it yet. So let me just show you what the Padlet looks like if you have chosen to do the poster. So I set up the Padlet in this way. The major ideas and origins of the Second Great Awakening. I'm just going to fix that real quick. Then you have how the market revolution brought on the Second Great Awakening, how westward expansion brought on the Second Great Awakening, and lastly, the outcomes of the Great Awakening. So if you have one of these topics that you're going to add to the Padlet, this is what you do. You go into the correct column and you hit this little plus sign, and then you upload. That is why when I gave you these instructions, I told you what you need to do is you need to first upload. Well, you have to download your poster to your Chromebook. Then you could go to the Padlet and you could upload it. Once you upload it, it will look like something like this. And so we could then go on here and take a look at the different wonderful posters. If you were doing the Google Slides, I set up this slide and I set one up for each class, and I was hoping that you would go in and add your slide to the appropriate section. So this is section 1, section 2, section 3. Now I did set it up so this way, so what? I'm not fully protected. Go away. All right, so I set it up so this way you folks can edit it. So if you have trouble with this today, please let me know, because someone did say they couldn't figure it out, but apparently the way it's set up, it should be working fine. But let me know if there's any problems with that. All right. And now let's get into what I want to talk about today. So, a few days ago, we talked about how there were a bunch of reformers known as abolitionists who really stepped up their fight against slavery, and we went into these individuals. I just wanted to also, while I'm at it, talk about years. I told you in the beginning of the year, I really don't get caught up on years because, you know, for example, Sojourner Truth. A lot of you said she got her freedom or she escaped in 1826, and she may have. However, what I'm going for here is that in 1827, New York abolished slavery. So, depending on what exactly you're talking about, you may get a little discrepancy as far as what year are you talking about when she escaped? Are you talking about when she was given her official freedom thanks to the state of New York? Again, with the Grimke sisters, um, I said they left South Carolina to be abolitionists in the 1820s, which is true. One of them left in the early 1820s, one of them left in the late 1820s, if I recall correctly. Now, they may not have, quote unquote, officially become abolitionists, joining official groups until the 30s. But, and again, that's why I don't get hung up on exactly what year it is, because it depends exactly what you're talking about. Then yesterday, on Monday, I posed the question really, well, if you had these abolitionists, why did it take so long? And I was hoping that what you would say is that the reason why it took so long was because sectionalism created by the greed of the South to make as much money off of cotton as they could. So here you have two forces pulling. On the one hand, you have the abolitionists who say this is morally bad, it's against Christian principles, it's inhumane, it goes against our Constitution. And then on the other hand, you have the Southerners who believe that cotton is king. And again, I mentioned yesterday that because of slavocracy, some people got rich, some didn't, but it really didn't matter. If you were part of the South and you believed in Southern culture, you still like slavery, you like the social hierarchy that it created. And so here are the two forces. Now, what made it more complicated, and we've already hinted at this, is the government. The government's role and what the government typically does when it comes to these social issues, whether it's slavery or today, whatever it may be, whatever's on the table, the government plays a vital role. And I did indicate before, and I've used this expression before, I didn't create this expression, however, but you'll hear this, that the Missouri Compromise of 1820, all it did was kick the can down the road. It delayed the inevitable. The inevitable was we need to address this. We can't maintain a healthy union, North and South, united as one, with this present issue of slavery. So for 30 years or so, the Missouri Compromise dealt with things. But then in 1850, by 1850, you have to come up with another compromise. And the reason is because things were starting to heat up again. The main reason why things were heating up is because we defeated the Mexicans in the Mexican-American War, and now we had gained all this territory. And I know you all recall the name of the treaty, the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, and that gave us all that land. So now we have to do something with it. What are we going to do with it? And we'll get into that in a second. So this is what we're going to talk about today, is how through the Compromise of 1850, the government once again basically kicks the can down the road. But not only do they kick the can down the road, they actually heat things up. In upcoming classes, we'll talk more about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, or Kansas-Nebraska Compromise of 1854, and the Dred Scott decision. And those two examples here are going to show you even more so how the government has a role in, rather than addressing this and ending this conflict, rather complicates it. So let's get into the Compromise of 1850. California was obtained in 1848 as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended that's right, the Mexican-American War. Henry Clay, you may remember his name. He's known as the Great Compromiser. He comes up with the Compromise of 1850. He is the one who also created the Missouri Compromise. So this compromise admits California as the 31st state, and it admits it as a free state. Naturally, such a large state, and it was very large because if you recall, with the gold rush and everyone moving out there were a lot of people. So the North was very happy. Here was a new state, a very large state, that would be admitted as a free state. That made the North very happy. However, part of this compromise contained something called the Fugitive Slave Act. And this basically said that if a slave escaped from the South and went up into your territory, into the Northern Territory, and a U.S. Marshal was looking for a slave, and they were on your territory, it was your responsibility, it was the law, that you assist in detaining that fugitive. So this way, the slave, the fugitive, could be returned to the master down in the South. So this kind of complicates it because before this, you had a divided nation. You had slaveholders in the South, and you had a free nation in the North, and they were pretty distinct. But now, if you're in the North and you're being told by the government that you have to return the slaves to the South, you're essentially contributing to the system of slavery. And that is how many Northerners felt. And this started to make them very, very angry. They said, oh, it was one thing when slavery existed, and we just had to deal with the fact that it existed in the South and we had no part of it, et cetera, et cetera. But now we're actually being called to return the slaves and actually contribute to this awful, awful system. If you did not assist with the apprehension of a fugitive that was on your property, you could actually be fined. So that became a really, really heated debate. But of course, that made the South happy because the South were able to get many of their fugitives back. Popular sovereignty is another important part of the Compromise of 1850, and I'll show you why in a second. Another thing that the compromise did was it outlawed slave trade in D.C., but it did not outlaw slavery in D.C. Can you imagine that? If you're around back then, before 1850, if you're going into the nation's capital and a block or so away from the White House or the Capitol building, you see an auction where they're actually auctioning off people, how dreadful must that be? And so getting rid of slave trade in the North, for the North, in D.C., really made Northerners happy, but it did not outlaw slavery itself. So because of these so-called compromises, yeah, it made the South happy on one account and it made the North happy for something else. But for the most part, it was just making people even more angry. The North were like, how can you ask us to return slaves? And the South were angry. How could you give such a large state freedom? So again, instead of satisfying people, it's actually making them get even more fiery. Take a look at this map from 1820. As you recall, and you'll see proof here, the 36th parallel divided the North from the South with regard to new states and how they would be admitted. And you can see the key here. So these were the free states. The slave states were these. Of course, Missouri is a slave state. Now, according to the Missouri Compromise of 1820, if you look at this territory, which is over what would become Texas, if you look at this territory, it is supposed to be closed to slavery as a result of the Missouri Compromise. Now, let's take a look 30 years later. This is a result of the Compromise of 1850. This would now be free states. This would be slave states, and there again you have Missouri going above the 36th parallel. California is admitted as a free state, as we said. But what about these territories? Utah is certainly above the 36th parallel, but yet it's still open. It's open to slavery by principle of popular sovereignty. And basically what that meant was that whoever went in and settled this land, the people of this state, eventually when it becomes a state, they would get to decide. So what happened to the Compromise of 1820? Well, it was no longer in effect, right? So much for that compromise. It was gone. So to give you an idea of the government at the time that was complicating this and creating these compromises, I'm going to show you two brief videos. One is going to be on the president who takes office and doesn't last very long, and then the one who follows him up. So pay attention for 60 seconds here, followed by another 60 seconds.
In 1848, the issue of slavery was finally catching up to America. The war with Mexico added a huge amount of land to the country. Most Northerners wanted new states to be free soil. Most Southerners thought any bans on slavery threatened their way of life. Zachary Taylor, old, rough, and ready, was not ready to solve this problem. Taylor was from a big slave-owning family in Virginia. He spent his life in the army, so when war with Mexico rolled around, Zach was ready to lead the attack. Big war victories made him insanely popular, but no one knew his politics because he had never been elected to anything. He was recruited by the Whigs and won the 1848 election, but once he was in office, he went rogue. Taylor's big concern was national unity. Whigs had a plan to admit California as a free state and establish a few new territories where slavery could be decided later. Taylor didn't want to drag out the slavery conflict, so he refused to support it. But he also threatened to march an army against any southern state that tried to leave the Union. Push never came to shove. Taylor started having stomach pains after a July 4th celebration in 1850. He died 5 days later, and Millard Fillmore stepped up to take his place.
All right, so let's hear about Mr. Fillmore.
The legend of Millard Fillmore starts in 1800 in upstate New York. Working his way out of poverty, Millard moved to Buffalo, became a lawyer, and joined the Anti-Masonic Party, which was mostly a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Millard switched to the Whig Party in the 1830s and served in the U.S. House and state government. In 1848, with Southerner Zachary Taylor running for president, Millard was supposed to be the boring vice president from the North. Taylor won, and then, in the great tradition of elected Whig presidents, died in office in July 1850. President Fillmore went right into the fire. Congress was trying to figure out if slavery should be allowed in the areas won in the Mexican-American War. Whig leaders came up with a compromise of 1850, make the North happy with the free state of California, make the South happy with tougher laws on runaway slaves, and put off everything else by making new lands into territories. Taylor hated that plan, but Fillmore was fine with it. He signed it into law. Because it was a compromise, it annoyed both Northerners and Southerners, and Fillmore didn't get the presidential nomination in 1852 for a second term. Regional conflict over slavery was finally tearing the Whig Party apart.
All right, so it wasn't only tearing the Whig Party apart, it was tearing the entire nation apart. And so in today's activity, you will read a brief passage from Khan Academy, and you will find that under day 7. And the way you get to the reading is you go into the activity, and there is a link. You will use the link to answer these questions. Make sure the link works. There it is. And basically this brief passage will reiterate what I've talked to you about today. After you go through this, you don't have to do these questions. After you read this, you just go into this and you answer these, and then of course you turn it in. Once again, if you have any questions, contact me. I am on the computer all day and all night, and I try to get back to you as soon as possible. As far as the assessment is concerned, please get that done as soon as possible, whether it's the Google Drawing or the Google Slides, and let me know if you have any difficulty posting to either one of those formats. I hope you're hanging in there and you have a great day. So long for now.